Welcome to another edition of the Mail Time Podcast. I am joined today by journalist and activist Sloan Rackmuth. Sloan, thanks so much for taking the time.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
I want to get right into it. Megyn Kelly yesterday comes out and essentially condemns Ben Shapiro, saying that he lied about or misled people, said something that wasn't true about what Candace Owens has been saying about Charlie Kirk's assassination. Notice she hasn't really said that kind of stuff about anyone else, her friend Tucker or Marjorie Taylor Greene. What's your take on the whole situation?
Well, look, Megyn Kelly is not this is not a surprise. She said from 2016 on, she's not a conservative. She said it as recently as 2022. In fact, and I'm quoting her, I'm not being rude, but as recently as 2024, right before the election, she said, and I quote, "I'm no one's bitch," meaning that she is not didn't have fidelity to the Republican Party. So let's just start right there. That she's considered a conservative or a Republican broadcaster is misbranding, and not by her, by others. So if we start right there, we'll kind of see the essence of her. Now let's back up into the 2016 election when she was still with Fox News and came against Trump. Well, that didn't work out too well for her, and she ended up leaving right after. I guess it was some imbroglio she was in with a sexual harassment thing, whatever. But she went to NBC, and the first thing that she did was, guess what, on her own show, had a series of specials involving President Trump's alleged accused offenders. So she's rolled this stuff out before. All she is a modern day shock jock, definitely not on the right or the left. And so, we need to dispose of the theory that she is a conservative. She's not. However, she did confuse me last week when she came out with this red hot take excoriating Republicans for being losers, wanting to lose, not knowing how to win. And I posted, and so did others. We're not going to take that kind of talk from someone that has done nothing but try to destroy and divide the Republican Party and the conservative movement since way before 2016.
It's so interesting because I think because of the Fox News branding, right? I actually appeared on her show twice when I was in college. People assume that she has a certain persuasion, but she was very careful to stay out of the
Yeah.
issues, right? Because she was trying to be down the middle, in contrast to O'Reilly, who was openly conservative. And then, of course, she was between O'Reilly and Sean Hannity for a little bit, if I'm not mistaken, before O'Reilly left and then everything moved. But it's just interesting to me how she has now become sort of a gatekeeper. She's saying, okay, I'm not going to cancel people. It's not, no one's asking anybody to be deplatformed, to be removed from the airwaves. We're just saying that that's not a conservative position, right? Bigotry is not a conservative position.
Right. If we zoom out, what's at play here in the interwebs of the conservative movement is, I think from the outside looking in, people would look at it as a soap opera because the woman spends time talking about Israel and Charlie Kirk, who is not living anymore, for a majority of her shows. So it's some sort of soap opera, and the code word Israel or Jew must be very popular in this soap opera that we're watching, right? For us Jews, it's existential because we understand that dehumanizing, degradation, and demonizing lead to murder. In fact, I wonder why Megyn Kelly doesn't see it that way, given her and Glenn Beck cried on air because they were legitimately upset about Charlie Kirk being murdered. And they said then it was because of dehumanizing words that did it. And yes, she's greenlighting the most disgusting, dehumanizing words towards Jews, but not only Jews, Daniel. It's actually Erica Kirk, because she came out and she said, "Wow, Ben Shapiro's lying about Erica Kirk." Well, Ben Shapiro wasn't lying, and Ben Shapiro understands that degrading, dehumanizing language can lead to murder, and I think he's worried. I think he's legitimately worried about the safety of Erica Kirk.
And it's also fascinating because Ben didn't actually kind of take the sword out of the sheath for quite a long time because he was doing everything he could to keep everything
Yep.
together for MAGA. That's what it looks like. And then, of course, when Tucker went way too far and
Yeah.
Charlie did not like Fuentes. That he hated Fuentes. And again, just because Charlie thought something doesn't mean that it's necessarily true, right? It goes on both sides. So I hate that they're now trying to use Charlie's words saying, oh, Charlie tweeted this 2.5 years ago. So this must be exactly what the conservative movement must do for the rest of time. That doesn't make sense. But I will add that nothing substantially has shifted in Nick Fuentes since the time that Charlie was assassinated. So it doesn't make sense that all of a sudden there's kind of this big tent coalition being built or saying that these were somehow mainstreaming these ideas. Again, it wasn't an issue of canceling. It was saying Tucker Carlson knows how to give a tough interview. He's given thousands, if not tens of thousands, of really tough interviews. If you look through his greatest hits when he was at Fox, he used to eviscerate woke people. He used to go after anyone he didn't like really, really hard. And when he was there with Fuentes, the only thing that was missing was the flowers from the dinner date. It didn't make any sense. So the idea that somehow this is someone you can't cancel, people are trying to silence, and she keeps invoking the pro-Israel movement. I think in place of Jews, it's not the pro-Israel movement. It's Americans
Well,
that live in America, that love America, that are saying that Tucker and Fuentes are doing horrible things to the conservative movement, are not pushing conservative ideas. And as Americans, we're standing up against anti-American ideas. But she keeps going back to the whole Israel thing. What does it have to do with Israel?
well, let's just go back when you said that, Nick Fuentes has remained as disgusting as ever. No, he's taken it up a notch because, again, he has implied that, I believe so. He's implied that Erica Kirk has something to do with the death of her own husband. So he has actually got it more pointed in his lunacy. We know that Candace Owens has. I mean, look, it's detrimental to MAGA, but what we have to understand is that institutionally speaking, right? We've got the institutions that are going to usher in a JD Vance, which is what this is all about. You will see these same factions complaining very loudly about what President Trump is doing to try to differentiate themselves from President Trump. And they believe would capture disgruntled voters within our coalition, plus be able to get this mythical unicorn of the under 30 male vote, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the point is this. Here's the plan. I don't know if it was before Charlie Kirk untimely death or after, but Heritage was going to be the think tank, if you will, and the enforcers, which is what they have been doing since Trump was elected, is to make sure that the right people get nominated and there's oversight, right? And they were going to have Tucker Carlson as their moving spirit, if you would, in their new version of, I would say, William F. Buckley, but it's actually Pat Buchanan. So you've got that
Well, yeah, by the way,
institutionally.
they're
And then you've
openly
got,
out and hating on Buckley, which is very weird.
oh yes, I know. Yeah, well they are, but some within Heritage aren't fully on board with that. But then you've got TPUSA, and my guess is that TPUSA was going to be the get out the vote vehicle for Vance. And then you've got the podcast bros, which Megyn likes to be part of, which is really weird because she has made a cottage industry about complaining about being a woman and being over sexualized when there's pictures of her in a bathing suit and lingerie all over the place, front and center, right? So I find that remarkable. But the point is that what you're looking at now is the full structure, right? I mean, we're on the very inside, so it's hard for us to see. But you've got, Heritage, you got the think tank, you've got the Get Out the Vote, and you've got the podcast bros, right? But more importantly, you've got this narrative, right? Don't trust experts. Oh, they're rhinos. Oh, they're neocons. Oh, they're so it's built in. And the final narrative is um, anti-Semitism is fake, racism is fake, all of that built in from this work that we've done actually to kind of disavow DEI. But they're now using that to engage in real racism and real anti-Semitism. So they believe they got the structure set in place and the permission structure set in place to completely abuse minorities. And that would include women also. It's when you zoom out, Daniel, it's not a winning strategy at all, to your point. We see it. But for whatever reason, they don't. And I'm not sure how many adults are in the room right now in terms of running JD Vance's campaign.
I don't want to if I don't mention someone's name specifically, it's not to the I'm not being deliberate. But other than Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin and a select few other in the podcast space, there's been basically silence when it comes to condemning this kind of open bigotry and racism, right? Fuentes is pushing a lot of
Dana
racism. You're talking about misogyny.
Dana Lash,
Where is the Dana Lash has
Dana
been
yeah.
amazing, but where is the moral fortitude of people like Matt Walsh? Because I see Matt Walsh out there on X, and he comes across as a total coward.
Well, the thing about Matt Walsh is he comes across as just a mean old man. Just like a disgruntled, I don't know why anyone finds him entertaining. He's really changed. There's nothing entertaining. The light has gone from him completely. But again, there is a network of podcast bros that will sow discontent. Their message is, white Christian males are the victim. Look at us. Oh my God. We aren't being taken care of. We aren't being serviced. And that's what the podcast bros are going to continue out. And the hilarious thing is somehow Israel is implicated in ruining the lives of this, again, mythical cohort of disgruntled people in America. And I just think that this is a very myopic plan that they've hatched, and it won't work. But what you have seen, I have to point this out, you've seen every conservative worth their salt come out and say, no, F no, we are not putting up with this. Here's how we're different. The Jewish community on the left would have stayed at Heritage and would have said, well, we can do more work from the inside. It's better not to make a scene. It will make them dislike us more. We pulled out in an effing week, we were gone. And the reason is Jews on the right side will not allow ourselves to be made a fig leaf to cover the bigotry at Heritage. That's what we did. So I'm actually uplifted by all the responses that we've gotten.
So I'm uplifted with you. Here are my 2 points of concern. One, if you look at prominent people who used to be conservative and I would argue are no longer conservative, let's focus on two: Bill Kristol and Tucker Carlson. Bill Kristol, nobody considers to be a conservative
Mhm.
anymore. And when he came out before the New York City mayoral election and he said something along the lines of he would actually vote for Zoran if he was there, people were mocking him, making fun of him, saying all sorts of things that were crazy. Tucker is not getting the same response from that podcast bro message group of people, right? So to me, it's kind of hard to look away from the fact that Bill Kristol is Jewish, and they like to say neocon because his father was one of the founders of the neoconservative movement, Irving Kristol. And when it comes to Tucker, it doesn't matter what he's saying because we just have to morph to it because he's Tucker Carlson. That's part one. Part two is when it comes to them making it about Israel, like you said, imagine it's any other issue. Someone on X actually said, imagine if Tucker came out in favor of DEI and transgender activism. Do you think that these podcast bros would respond in the same way? Whereas now he's promoting insane conspiracy theories
Yeah.
through Jeffrey Sachs and others that Heritage and Hillsdale College both sponsored these episodes in which the Jews are blamed for almost every ill in the world. So those two things combined has me very, very freaked out. That's not to say that it's not positive that there are
I
some
don't think,
people
yeah.
speaking up, but that part is just very strange to me.
I don't think he should freak you out. Number one, Bill Kristol is a more intellectually honest than Tucker is. He came out and said, I am not a Republican anymore. I am not going to support Republicans. I do not like Trump. He came out and denounced it. You've never heard Tucker Carlson denouncing Trump at all. In fact, he's very clever. He'll alternatively support some of his positions. So that's number one.
It's a good
There
point.
is that you have a clear delineation. He said this. And the second one, it being sponsored, et cetera. And you said something about, well, if Tucker went on to, sponsor kiddie drag shows, he'd be dropped at once. And I have an analog for you. The guy's come out and called Christian Zionists heretics. He said he hates them the worst in the world. And then he went and denied the Sudanese Holocaust of Christians, as well as a Nigerian Holocaust of Christians. Now, he did it because they're black. He doesn't like black people. So it's black Christians that he doesn't like. It's Zionist Christians that he doesn't like. So I would argue that he actually has put the death knell in getting support from Heritage, especially Hillsdale College. So will they follow him off a bridge, etc.? Well, they are, because as you know, he is a cultural terrorist, because now that they have come out for him, now the cat's out of the bag and they do support him, he is going to drag them all over hell and back. He probably will have a trans activist on in a few, daring them to pull their support. That's who he is, Daniel.
I'll just say that as a counterpoint that this he notice he's talking about the Christian when he talked about Christian Zionism being a heresy, he's talking about it again, it goes back to Israel, right? So he's all these things are foreign. He hasn't yet done it domestically. That's the only
Well,
difference. But I do hear you
it
about
goes back
yeah,
to Christianity.
correct.
It goes back to the Old Testament. And most Christians think that Christianity without the Old Testament is heresy. So no, when you start talking about Christian Zionists, you do leave. Sure, it's about Israel, but Israel isn't just for Jews, as we well know. It is the
Right.
Holy Land for Christians.
But what I'm saying is that
And
he's the reason why it's so disingenuous is that he's not coming at it saying, I have a theological question that I want to bring on biblical scholars to talk about
right,
this topic in an authentic way, which he has the power to do that. And you know something? That would be a very interesting question. His questions for Ted Cruz, where he was so sarcastic and obnoxious, I would actually have liked to see those
yeah,
questions asked to a theologian. I would enjoy hearing how you bridge biblical support and your religious support with a modern day political state. I think that's an interesting question. It's interesting for Jews. It's interesting for Christians. It's interesting in the Islamic world. I would like to actually learn about how the quote unquote experts see these
mm,
things going from a political perspective, because it has to do with foreign policy. It also has to do with domestic policy. And I think it's interesting. But he doesn't do that. He comes at it saying, oh, genocide, 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 genocide. Oh, Christian heresy. That's a very different way of approaching the same question, where you're very, it's very clear what he's trying to do, because when he
yeah.
wants to actually have the conversation, he can have the conversation. So that's where it really
Well,
goes off the rails to me and brings it back to the Israel question, which is also just crazy because, like maybe we talked about at the beginning, the stuff that's been said on their programs where they're all of a sudden nitpicking, saying what word did Ben use to talk about what Erica Kirk is accused of by Candace. This is in the case of Megyn. She has Marjorie Taylor Greene, Glenn Greenwald, these crazy whack jobs saying the craziest things.
mhm.
Marjorie Taylor Greene on Megyn's show, as I tweeted out earlier today, accused Jews of being dual loyalists who are not advocating for America, but are advocating for Israel under all circumstances. And Megyn does not push back. She actually says she agrees with her.
Right. Well, I mean, again, when you look at it as the purpose of what they're trying to do, and it's to shift the Overton window to where the base, or enough of the base, will abandon Israel. But look, here the bottom line is this: a full third of donors are evangelical Christians in the Republican Party. Believe it or not, another third are actually Jews in the Republican Party. So, this is all fun and games in a soap opera. And again, I argue it has nothing to do with Republican politics. People are owning it. I'm not going to own it. It is entertainment, and they're trying to shift the Overton window. So the problem is when this is applied, right? If this completely abandoning Israel, right, and the work they need to do, Daniel, to do it, they need to demonize the hell out of Jews and Zionist Christians on the way to moving that Overton window. You will have somebody that might get 35% at best of a national vote, period. Because also, you don't the party becomes almost indistinguishable in terms of racism and foreign policy than the Democrats, number one. Number two, the thing about evangelicals, they will not turn out to vote, period. That's the problem. When they do, it'll be Republican, but they just will not turn out to vote and they won't donate. So in other words, when this is all fun and games and good in practice, but you will have this issue pulled down, and I do elections here in North Carolina. You will have it pulled down into every single election from dog catcher up because they will be able to link sound bites about women, about Black people and Jews, to the Heritage Foundation and associate a candidate with the Heritage Foundation or TPUSA. TPUSA is also an instrument of spreading blood libels against Jews through their affiliation with Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Dave Smith, and Matt Gaetz. And one thing, too, I found interesting, and I'm becoming less patient with this, is Tyler Boyer from TPUSA tweeted
Yes.
out a little while ago, "Oh my gosh, we're receiving threats. This is the worst thing ever." Listen, buddy, because of your friends, we receive threats, serious one, death threats, every single day. So I'm sorry, I'm running out of patience for your, crying and bitching and complaining about the problems that you and your buddies are actually causing. And in fact, they've got an Ohio chapter leader who is an outright groiper himself. So I don't want to hear any more complaining. Thank you very much from TPUSA because of their actions. We're all under threat.
Now, how do you think this impacts the Republican Party going forward? Do you think that JD Vance is kind of tethered to Tucker Carlson and this TPUSA way of thinking, or is
Yes.
there any hope for him?
No way
And
out.
do you think that no way out? So JD Vance is a problem.
JD Vance is a huge problem. No, I mean, I told you, I mean, the setup was, the think tank, right, will promote. You've got the Federalists now, which I've written for. I've written for the American Conservative and I've written for the Federalists. So they've completely turned.
Well,
They're in this
Sean
camp. And
Davis,
so
I have to
they
say, Sean Davis and the whole heritage thing, he came out with some crazy stuff. I didn't even. It was hard to even follow. It was untethered from reality.
well, there's a lot of, this angry Christian nationalism, I guess that you call it, but it does not translate well for elections. And so I do run elections, and I have run campaigns. And when I look to do negative campaigning, I look for material that I can use that would associate candidates with the extreme. You've got a treasure trove. All that a Democrat strategist needs to do is to go online and look at the things that decent, everyday conservatives have said to push back. They could look at my X feed or yours or anyone else's in the movement, including Dinesh D'Souza, and others, and say, "Wow, okay, these are salient points." And so, look, Vance is done. Vance is so afraid of Nick Fuentes that last week, and the New York Times published a big headline about Nick Fuentes being the new Charlie Kirk and blah, blah, blah. President Trump would have never allowed that to happen. He would have come back and excoriated the New York Times. And oh, by the way, JD Vance is quite the mean lord himself. So for him to hide under his desk about a man that's claiming to take the place of his best friend, right? And one who excoriated his own wife, for him to cower away from saying something, how do we expect him to react to Putin or Kim Jong il or any other dictator on the scene? We can't. He's weak at best or complicit at worst.
I also thought it was very fascinating when that Groiper at the TPUSA event asked him about the genocide and Jews targeting Christians, and he didn't
Yeah.
actually refute any of that. And he said that this lobby doesn't, or something along those lines, doesn't control this president. Not that
Who controls
no, they
this
don't control any
president?
president.
He
This
did more.
president. I thought that was
He did
extremely
terribly.
damaging.
He disqualified himself. Well, he disqualified himself with that. And then the week before, he came out and volunteered the information. Volunteered, "I don't give a damn about these chats." Okay, so no one brought it up, but I really care about this Virginia guy that said blah, 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 blah. Well, the American people who had not read the chats right? Of young Republicans calling black people monkeys and watermelon people. And, I guess talking about Hitler. What did they go do? They went to go read the chats. And in their mind, what stuck in their mind was, wow, we have a vice president that doesn't care about calling black people monkeys. And then the next week, he does this with TPUSA. And then the next week, he doesn't stand up. Look, this is not our guy. I can tell you, this is not our guy. He doesn't have the strength, wherewithal, or frankly, interest to meaningfully distance himself, hell, from even Nick Fuentes, but he will never leave the side of Tucker Carlson. Never.
It's a scary proposition because the concept that there's really nothing that this one person can do that would disqualify them, even when they're promoting absolutely wild conspiracy theories and
Yeah.
bigotry, it's hard to fathom that that's the reality. All we're asking for is a consistent standard. We, people that love America, are asking for consistent standard. They keep trying to make it about if you're Jewish or not, and your Jewish identity is not uh, necessary to recognize that you're promoting racism. And I don't understand how there are so many in the commentary class that just won't say anything. And what they're doing, and like you talking about cowardice. I thought it was cowardice of so many commentators that it fell on Ben Shapiro to actually have to take that big stand against Fuentes and Tucker. That should have been there could have been 50 other podcasters that could have done something like that. And the fact that it fell on Ben to that extent, it says a lot. So I'll try to I'll see your positive side and say that yes, a lot of people are standing up, but it still is
They
troubling.
are.
Even the fact that Kevin Roberts, the president of Heritage, could read that video, and when he was reading it to prepare to speak, his alarms weren't going off that, oh, maybe I shouldn't say this because this is absolutely crazy. Right? How did we get to the point that that was a
Well,
normal thing to say?
look, he is a laughing stock in DC. I work in DC quite often. I know plenty of people and staffers. I don't know if there's a word that's more magnified than laughing stock, but it would be that. He is the cover boy for shitty leadership. I'm telling you. And I wrote this and I meant it. It's he's kind of playing with house money during the government shutdown where none of his people have to be up on the Hill testifying as an expert in legislative meetings. But I think there might come a day where they send an expert up on the Hill, and all that the Democrats and Republicans want to talk about is, wow, I hear you guys have a one voice policy over there at Heritage. So let me read some of the things that Nick Fuentes has said about women. For instance, they like to be raped. Tell me something, Heritage person. You have a one voice over there. Do you think women should be raped? Well, I don't know. This is going to be an absolute circus. It's going to be televised to everyone. And in other words, it's all fun and games until um the devil has to pay its due, and it is coming. Don't worry. So in other words, there's a lot of things that you see that are outrageous and infuriating, but one thing that never changes in the world is the law of human nature.
How did we before I let you go here, did you see this coming? Like, is anyone who's been active in these politics seen this
Yes.
growing and saying this is a huge problem? How long have you seen this
Yes.
brewing?
Well, I was stalked by a band of neo Nazis about 3 years ago. It started actually 4 years ago. Ran a black candidate, and these are people in the Republican Party here in North Carolina. They brought fake criminal charges against me. They threatened my life. They targeted my home. I had to sue one of them. One of them now, I believe she works or used to with Steve Bannon, actually. And it's been 5 years for her stalking me, hunting me, because I simply don't like Jews in the party. So I've experienced it firsthand. It's scary, it's real, and it is an existential threat to the Jewish people. For when you are not allowed as a Jew to feel welcomed in at least one political party in your country, that is you are at, the prelude to a Holocaust. And we know the Democrats, um, don't make Jews feel welcome. They stay, I don't know why they do. And now we're to the second party. And it's because I've experienced this, because I understand the very dire threat that we face. And I'm going to fight like hell every damn day and talk about this every damn day. And I'm very encouraged that I'm not alone.
I'll tell you that as I saw this emerging, I decided that I have to double down, like you said, to try to make sure that we stand up against it because it's
Yeah.
completely un-American and it's divorced from the Charlie Kirk that I knew. The Charlie Kirk that I knew a decade ago was not anything like this. So obviously the organization
No,
grew and the movement grew, but Charlie at his core was nothing like this. And it's very sad to see the
no.
manipulation of his voice in such a way.
It is. It is I feel now I wasn't happy with a lot of things that USA did by platforming Tucker. But now that Charlie is gone, I feel horrible for him watching the people that were closest to him burn the organization down. That's what they're doing, right? I mean, they were and I was on board with selling the idea that more people need to get married, go to church and be civically responsible. That in 2 months time is over. Is over. You've got leading figures within the movement criticizing and condemning half of the base. They're criticizing half of the base. You're not doing this. You're not doing. I've never seen a political organization on either side abuse people within its own party the way I've seen TPUSA do that over the last, I guess, since
2
Charlie's
months?
death. And
Right.
I know that yeah, and it's been crazy, right?
It's
But
also
I
the
know that an
gaslighting, like,
organization cannot sustain it.
when we call
Mhm.
out the bigotry, the
Yeah.
gaslighting is just like, "Oh, well, if only we would stop infighting, then everything would be great." You're not
Oh,
addressing any of the
right,
issues.
and Charlie wa yeah, when Charlie Kirk would have wanted Tucker Carlson. Um, Charlie Kirk wouldn't want his organization to go down in flames in less than a year, and that's what they're staring down the barrel of. Donors don't wanna participate in this stuff. And they're going to become irrelevant because I'll tell you, the way it's set up now, that only these podcast pros, TPUSA, and maybe Heritage, they're only going to have access to two bands. And whoever runs in a primary against them, be it Rubio, be it DeSantis, be it Cruz, whoever, they're not going to give these organizations the time of day. So they know that their age of relevancy is going to be eclipsed at some point, right? So they're going all in on JD Vance.
Interesting times ahead, Sloan. I really appreciate your very authoritative
Thank you.
summary of what's going on. I think it's very helpful for the audience, and I hope that we can have you back on to
Thank you.
discuss issues like this in the near future.
Well, I hope I'm
Thank you.
wrong on everything I
Well,
said, but
I hope you're wrong as well, but I we'll see. Thank you.